Well, good evening. Chaplain Tim Miner here from, well, your nation's capital city, and it sure is my privilege to chat with you this evening and lead a discussion with a number of other folks who are on board here to talk about the career of weather. There is there are four of us scheduled on this evening, and you'll expect to hear more from us later on during the week. I do want to welcome you to a very exciting National Geography Awareness Week. It is the Geographical Awareness Week, and this is Civil Air Patrol's contribution to the National Geographical Awareness Week. And weather is a very, very, very important topic for that as well. So it sure is our privilege to chat with you this evening. With me this evening is we have Chaplain Robert Albert, and I'm going to introduce him. And Robert, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and tell a little bit about your story, sir, and about how weather was your career in the past, and what you did in the weather career field, sir.
Okay. I started quite a while ago. Came out of high school, didn't want to know what I wanted to do, and knew I didn't ever want to go to school again. So I enlisted in the Air Force because I was about to be drafted. It was the build-up to the Vietnam War, and somehow, due to circumstances, I got selected for weather school as a weather observer. Didn't even know what it was, but I sure am glad that someone along the way decided to select me. Back then we had weather observers and weather forecasters. Now the two fields are combined, and we have weather specialists in air weather service. The weather observer basically told what was going on outside at the current time, and did most of the plotting of maps and charts and things in the weather station, also filing of all the weather data. We didn't have a lot of computers. In fact, we didn't have any computers when I came in. From there, in my fourth year after I re-enlisted the first time, went back to school for forecasting. Got to really liking school by that time. The Air Force taught me two things. One, that I was able to go through school and do well, and the other was how to learn. And I appreciate them very much for doing that. The forecaster aspect was a 9-month school. Observer was a 6-month school. Now we just go through, the enlisted folks go through one 21-week school and come out as a weather specialist with a 2-year degree and 72 credit hours earned. The college credit hours earned. Which is quite a bit more than we got for what we went through. Forecasting in the enlisted side of the house is just the same as the officer side of the house. We do the same things. Air Weather Service is a small unit, so an enlisted person has a lot of opportunities. Within the first 6 years of my enlisted career, I was acting as the wing weather officer at Shaw Air Force Base for 2 of the squadrons. We were short on officers, so I got to fill them as a staff sergeant. From there, we went to Germany, and in Germany got moved from the detachment level at Rhein-Main Air Force Base to squadron level, and became the training NCO and maintenance NCO for the entire area of Europe. Got to go to several of the bases in Europe on inspections and assistance visits. The high point probably of my career was my last assignment as the station chief at Andrews Air Force Base, the Presidential Weather Unit, Weather Support Unit. President Reagan was president at the time, and the station chief job in any other field in the Air Force would be considered the director of operations, but seeing as we had enlisted people doing it and not officers, they called us station chiefs. We also had detachment commanders, but if you were enlisted in a detachment commander, you were called the detachment chief. And that would have probably been the next thing if I hadn't retired and went back to school to get into clergy. Air Weather Service opportunities were wonderful. It's a continuous school, or at least it was for me, between observing and forecasting school. Also went to advanced radar school, advanced meteorology school, tropical meteorology school. All at that time were at Chanute. Now they're at Keesler Air Force Base. And the opportunities are wide because we support all the different aspects of the Air Force. We also support the Army. And in certain cases, we have folks involved in climatology. Also, we had some observers and forecasters working with the CIA during the Vietnam War. I'm not sure that we still do that. The field is so wonderful. There's so many opportunities in it. And one of the things that I really like the best is when you move from area to area, different bases, the whole weather scheme changes because of local conditions and because of different parts of the country or the world that you're located in. Also, if an enlisted person wants to really become combat ready and take part in that, we have the special operations weather teams, and you'll get all kinds of combat training and survival training and all, and become part of the special operations units of both the Air Force and the Army. So the opportunities are wide open. It's a great field for someone who really doesn't feel or want to or can afford to go to college. It's a great learning opportunity for someone who got out of high school and just doesn't like school. The Air Force will teach you how to learn and how to really get into liking classroom situations. And I credit the Air Force for a good portion of how I've turned out in life. Things have changed a lot over the years since I retired even, and a lot more advanced work with computers and technology. So I'm sure the opportunities today are even far greater than they were when I was in. Last weather station I was in was just a short while ago at McIntyre Air National Guard Base, and it's nothing like the weather stations that I retired from. But the opportunities are there, and anyone would be willing to sit down and talk with you about how you can get involved and what it would take for you to become an Air Weather Service enlisted person. Tim, I don't know what else you'd like me to add.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I do want to let everybody know that this is an interactive hour, and with each and every one of our guests, if you have a question, just email your question, please, to careers@hc.cap.gov. That's careers@hc.cap.gov, and we'll be sharing those questions with our guests this evening. Chaplain Albert, thanks so much. One question that I have is, how long did you spend in the career field of weather in the Air Force?
I was in for a total of 21 and a half years. Went from obviously Airman Basic in basic training to Senior Master Sergeant when I retired, and had the opportunity, if I had stayed in, to be the detachment chief at Buckley Field, Colorado, and promotion to chief.
And what was your what rank did you achieve in the Air Force in the enlisted ranks, sir?
E8, Senior Master Sergeant.
Very good. What kind of schooling did you go to any additional schooling besides the Air Force technical schools? Did you go to any regular universities, or was there an opportunity to get a college degree or degrees in the weather career field?
There were. We had the several different colleges associated with different bases, and you could take courses in any of them. Um, I got an Associate of Science in weather forecasting. Like I had said, now I believe that you have an associate's degree when you graduate from the Air Force School for weather specialist with 72 hours of college credit. And also, I was fortunate enough to be on a base with an Aero Club, and got all my pilot ratings while I was in the service, in Air Weather Service, up to and including the Certified Flight Instructor instrument.
That's great. And what were the what was duty like for you in a base weather station? How were you working shifts? Were you working regular hours? What is the duty like for an enlisted person?
We worked shifts. We worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we had most of the time 8-hour shifts. We'd work days, swings, or mids. And we rotated them. We had a different rotation. A lot of guys will work days for a week or two and then go to swings. We did it every 2 days. Every 2 shifts we rotated. So we worked six days on, and we had 3 days off usually. One time I was closing a Oklahoma City Air Force station. There was only 2 of us there. We worked 12 hours on, 12 hours off for about 2 months. So sometimes it gets rough if you're short-handed. But we did work shifts. The job in the weather station was pretty tedious. You got to be able to multitask, because you've got pilots at the counter, you've got the pilot-to-metro radio that you're talking on, you've got pilots on the phone wanting briefings, plus you've got the other folks working around you. You've got forecasts that have to go out on a set schedule, and amendments if things change that you hadn't expected to be that way. So it gets pretty busy, and you got to be able to multitask.
Are you familiar? We know that the Air Force provides the weather information to the Army. We know the other big military provider is the United States Navy. Did you ever get a chance to interact with anyone from the United States Navy?
No, I didn't. I got to interact with the Army quite a bit, but the Navy, I did not have that opportunity. Most of the time when I was stationed inland, with the exception of Myrtle Beach, where we were right on the coast, but there was no Navy around us.
And what kind of work would be available to somebody who has made a career? Now, obviously, you took a totally different path by going to seminary and becoming a Civil Air Patrol chaplain and clergy, and so that's really a unique turn of events. But for somebody who wanted to go from being an enlisted member of the United States Air Force to becoming a weather person on the civilian world, what kind of opportunities do you know about, and what have your peers are they up to?
There are many. When I got out, I was a weather forecaster on television for a while I was pastoring a church at Myrtle Beach. I also received requests from the Weather Channel to send tapes to them. They were interested in having me as part of their team. Some of the guys that got out, one of the people I was stationed at Shaw with, became the station chief at McIntyre Air National Guard Base, and worked there until he retired from that as a second retirement. A lot of the folks that I knew that got into hurricane hunting simply took their uniform off and were hired on as civilians on the hurricane hunting side of the house. So opportunities abound. The bases, the civilian airports that have weather folks, they draw heavily from the experience of people retiring from the Air Force.
Well, that's great. It's sure been a great opportunity to chat with you, and I really appreciate that you sharing your story with us. I'm
That's
wonder. I really do appreciate that. Thanks so much, and I know that you'll want to stay with us and share your experiences. It's about time that we move to another one of our guests. So I'd like to uh, turn the microphone over to another of our service members, and that would be Commander Christy Twining from the NOAA Commissioned Officers Corps. And Commander Twining, sure great to have you here. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm going to make you the primary on the video now. And Commander, thanks so much. And if you'll just start out by telling us a little bit about your service and what it is you do in the weather career field, please.
Sure. I want to first start out by saying I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you, so I'm just going to speak and hopefully you can hear me okay. I apologize. I got on a little bit late, but I did hear the other gentleman speaking somewhat, and my name is Commander Christy Twining, and I'm calling in from Washington, D.C. I work for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Currently flying my desk, but I did just get back from flying a training mission on a Gulfstream 4, which is a high-altitude surveillance weather aircraft. And we use that aircraft to fly a surveillance around hurricanes and severe storms. The season is just about getting ready to wrap up. We're just about at the end of hurricane season, and so things are slowing down in the tropics, but we did have an interesting season, and I got into this field first about 15 years ago. I had been working up in Alaska on fishing vessels, actually, and got interested in weather then. And I found out about NOAA, a uniformed service under the Department of Commerce, through some friends of mine who worked for NOAA. And I got commissioned in 1999, and I've been with them ever since. So a wide range of different types of opportunities within that service.
Commander Twining, that's really fascinating, and I have to admit that probably very few people in the Civil Air Patrol or in Junior ROTC and all the other folks who are out there watching this in high school know very much about the NOAA Commissioned Corps. Could you tell us a little bit about what that uniformed service is really all about?
Sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, we're very small. We're the 7th and smallest of the uniformed service under the Department of Commerce, and we got our start way back. We can trace our heritage back to Thomas Jefferson back in the 1800s. We started out as a mapping and surveying corps, and mostly to survey and make nautical charts for commerce and for navigation, and it turned into a uniformed service because of the need to basically to have some structure and some well organization to the Corps, and a lot of the Army and Navy military service had supported this agency in the beginning, and when they went to go fight in the Civil War, actually, they pulled a lot of those uniform officers out of this Corps, and NOAA was sort of born from that agency. Some of the interesting things we do, we have 17 survey vessels that range from 120 feet all the way up to 245 feet, I believe, and we also have nine aircraft. We do everything from weather reconnaissance to coastal mapping. We survey after the 9/11 bombings. We do a lot of imaging. We do marine mammal observations for the National Marine Fisheries Service and National Marine Mammal Labs. We do a lot of hurricane research. We have 2 P-3 aircraft that have a variety of weather instruments. We serve every line office under NOAA, from the Satellite Service to the National Marine Fisheries Service to the Ocean Service, and of course the Weather Service. So we have a lot of involvement with all of NOAA, which is a very, very profound science agency under the Department of Commerce.
Commander Twining, a question coming in from one of our viewers. I'd already hyped you up as a hurricane hunter, and of course the question is, what's it like to fly around a hurricane?
Well, I was hoping it would be a little bit more glamorous than it sounds, but it has its good times and its bad times, meaning sometimes it's really exciting and we get bumped around a lot, and other times it's just not much more than a turbulence you would find in a commercial aircraft. But we did just fly into Hurricane Edward, which at the time was a Category 3 storm, and we did something very unique inside Hurricane Edward. This was back in September. We launched the first ever unmanned aerial vehicle inside the eye of a hurricane, and we flew it around inside Edward, and the drone or unmanned vehicle was only about 13 pounds and about a 3-foot wingspan, and it was able to measure 100-knot winds. So that was one of the more exciting hurricane storms I've flown in.
Did you get to recover that, or is that drone lost once you've deployed it?
It is normally recoverable over land, but not in a storm. We had seas of over 50 feet, so probably crashed and broke up on impact.
Was the operator inside your airplane at the time?
Yes, the operator was at the control of nothing more than a computer and an autopilot program that was installed on this computer, and everything was controlled via the aircraft control station. And normally we can control it from a ground control station, but in this case we were out over, well offshore over the middle of the ocean. We didn't have that opportunity.
Commander, where is all this data that you're out there collecting in hurricanes? Where is it going?
This data is available to the public. It's mostly used, the raw data format is mostly used by both the Hurricane Center, which is a division under the National Weather Service, and also the Hurricane Research Division, which is an office underneath the Ocean and Atmospheric Research branch of our agency. And they use the data to test new models, to initiate models, to make the weather forecast models better. And one of the major things that this summer we were trying to work out is what happens, how to better remove the error in initiating a forecast model. And there's a lot of error when these models are first initiated. So this data would help improve that, and it could could eliminate a lot of the intensity and the forecast errors that we see.
Commander, another one of our listeners is asking the question, or making the statement, "Wow, I want to be like her. What kind of college degree do I need?"
Well, most of our folks well, everybody has at least a 4-year degree in a science-related field. We do have some people that have math and engineering, which is highly desirable. Meteorology, of course, is desirable. I had a marine biology degree, and we love people with a lot of leadership qualities, which I've noticed in the Civil Air Patrol. A lot of these young folks coming up have these great characteristics. So a 4-year degree, and a lot of folks go on to get an advanced degree, but it's not necessary to get into the NOAA Corps. And then it's quite an intense application process, but everybody that we accept into our officer corps has good grades. Excellent grades is always nice, but it's not mandatory. Well-roundedness is important. A good team player, a good leader, and good communication skills, and good all-around skills is what we look for in our incoming officers.
Commander Twining, another viewer asks, noted that you have a marine biology degree. Do you get to swim with the dolphins, or go out there and do things with sea life with your degree?
The extent of my swimming with dolphins, probably ended in college. As soon as I came into the NOAA Corps, the closest I got to them was from an airplane about 1,000 feet above them. But I've done a lot of viewing, flying around marine mammals, right whales, highly endangered whales up in New England and along the eastern shoreline, and also blue whales. We've done a lot of surveying from the air, but I haven't done any up close and personal swimming with them in a long time.
Commander, as an aviator, one of our cadets is asking what kind of aviation background should they bring forward so that they can fly around hurricanes like you?
Well, it's not required, but it is certainly desirable for people to come in with a commercial multi-engine instrument rating and some flight experience. The way I got into aviation was what I guess you would call through the hawse pipe, where I came in to drive ships first, and then I was accepted into the program after my 2-year sea tour. But we do take direct-to-aviation people with an aviation background who are good candidates to go straight into the aviation side, and they don't need to go out to sea. But those are really the minimum qualifications for somebody who would be coming direct into the program. If you chose to go out to sea first and then got accepted into the aviation program, it would be a 2-year sea tour, which is really a lot of fun. And you learn a lot about the sea side of NOAA, which is really important to be well-rounded within the NOAA Corps. And then you would apply for the program, pass the physical, and then go through maybe a refresher training. We did all of our training at Vero Beach Flight Safety Academy, and it would be sort of that route.
And where would they be stationed if they were flying with the NOAA Corps just like you?
Well, we have all of our aircraft, our 9 aircraft, are based out of Tampa, Florida, MacDill Air Force Base. Even though the planes aren't there all the time, that's where we consider them home base. So all of the flight billets, except for a couple associated with our King Air aircraft, are based in Tampa, Florida. And the rest would be based out of our remote sensing division, which is in Silver Spring, Maryland, and you would fly based out of that program in Silver Spring. But everybody else would be based out of MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa.
One of our listeners asks, what's the highest ranking officer in the NOAA Corps?
Well, we actually have a 3-star for the first time in several years. We have a vice admiral, and he is not he's not working for, he's a NOAA Corps officer, but he is the deputy undersecretary of oceans and atmosphere for NOAA. So he's much higher up than the director of the NOAA Corps. We have a 2-star that directs the NOAA Corps, and a 1-star that is the deputy director for the NOAA Corps. And then we have several captains, 06s and 05s, and down the line all the way to 01s, which are ensigns.
Very good. Do you have enlisted people in the NOAA Corps?
We do not. We work hand in hand with civilians and civil service, and then we just have about 330 NOAA Corps officers that make up the Corps.
Very good. Commander, one final question from one of our viewers, and that would be, how much math and science do I really have to take in order to do this kind of work?
Well, we actually have a calculus requirement, so I don't know if that's waivable or not. If you're just struggling with calculus and you can't get it, there might be something we can do. But I do know that I had to take 2 years of calculus in college in order to qualify for the NOAA Corps. I've never used calculus since, but it must be important to have that math background. Now, I don't know if it's like I said, there might be some negotiation there. So don't fret it if you're not good in math or you're not great in math. It's always good to be good in math, but I don't think you have to be Einstein.
Very good. Commander Twining, thanks so very much for sharing your time with us this evening. And I do know that you have another educational requirement coming up for yourself personally later on. I know that, so thank you so much. I know you'll be signing off, but we'll be in touch with you. And I know that you appeared in my own squadron here in the Washington, D.C. area, and you've made yourself available to all of us in the Civil Air Patrol with this call and with other things. And we really do appreciate the NOAA Corps' access to us and stepping forward with us and sharing your life story and your weather involvement. And you're certainly a wonderful role model for the young men and women out there in our Cadet Corps. Thank you so much for being part of that today, Commander.
Thank you so much for your interest, and anytime. I appreciate all of your service, and thank you for the opportunity.
Very good. Well, good night, and we turn it over now to our another exciting person for whom mathematics is a little bit more appropriate, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Cecilia Miner. And we'll turn on her camera now and her microphone. Dr. Miner, thanks so very much for being with us this evening. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in weather and how you came to the weather career field?
Okay, first, can you hear me okay?
You're doing great. Loud and clear. Loud and clear, as we say in aviation.
Okay. Well, I have been really interested to listen to Chaplain Albert and Commander Twining because I feel like I kind of bridge a gap. I spent 22 years in the Air Force. I was all on the officer side. I joined the Air Force to be a hurricane hunter. I never got to do that because somewhere along the way I got on the geek track, and once I was on the geek track, the Air Force kept sending me to school all the way through for my PhD, and that's why I can keep that doctor now. The Air Force, as Chaplain Albert said, I think shaped me. It was a wonderful experience for the 22 years I was in. As like any job, some assignments are better than others, but I had a really wonderful assignment in Hawaii where I was able to work with satellite analysis and support a really neat mission that unfortunately no longer exists. But I have to say that my most exciting time, and the reason I was asked to be on here, was I was the commander of Learmont Solar Observatory in Learmont, Western Australia for 2 years. And so I actually got to work in the space weather field. And I'm sure I'll be asked more about that in a bit, but I will continue now with how I progressed. And from there I went to a number of assignments that I ended up teaching at the Air Force Institute of Technology, teaching graduate students, and that's where I retired from the Air Force. From then I went on to do some contracting work after I retired, one of which was being a meteorologist doing contract work for the Federal Aviation Administration, and that led to my present job, which brings me into NOAA. I now work for National Weather Service in the Aviation Weather Services branch. So while I'm a staff person and not an operations person, it just feels like I'm kind of bridging the gap between the previous two speakers. So I was asked to speak a little bit about space weather. It sounds like a really odd thing to talk about space weather. We're all used to the normal weather we experience in the lowest 6 miles of atmosphere, and that's the temperature, the pressure, the density, the winds. Well, space weather is the changes in the solar terrestrial environment, mostly in the upper atmosphere, but also effects that reach the ground at times, because the sun is obviously our primary star. There are a number of effects that was the reason that made it exciting is that you knew you were doing something every single day that could protect a power grid from going down, or a pipeline from reaching point corrosion status, or a satellite from being taken out of orbit, or airplanes from losing their communication or navigation or exposing their passengers to unnecessary radiation. It was an exciting job just to be an observer and to work in that sort of environment in space weather. There are a number of space weather observatories in the Air Force, if that's the sort of track you would like to pursue. There's one in San Vito, Italy, Claremont, Australia, as I said, Sagamore Hill in Massachusetts, and I'm kind of running out of the other two. One is in Kaena Point, Hawaii, and I think there's a fifth one, and I'm just sort of running out of that now. But it's a job that was suited a geek like me. I was one of those people who was good at math. I majored in math. Went to basic meteorology training at Texas A&M, and from there just kept going back to school, one school after another. So did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
Yes, Dr. Miner, a question does come in from one of our viewers, and they're asking, again, that question about mathematics, about how much math, and actually also computer science. Is that an important field?
I'd have to say overall computer science trumps math, but the Air Force and the National Weather Service both have mathematics requirements. And just to get in, you have to have, as the Commander Twining said, calculus and differential equations, at least to get to apply toward your meteorology status. What I'm seeing nowadays for the folks who are coming into the National Weather Service to work as forecasters in the field, they're not being hired without a lot of computer science or just computer ability, not just being able to fix a computer or to get something running, but the people who can actually code, not just use applications, but code, write scripts, create your own programs, manipulate. So it takes a certain amount of talent and experience, people who are just interested in doing that sort of work.
Question comes in about you being a woman in a very scientific field. How is it being a woman in a very scientific field? What are your impressions of that?
Well, it certainly has been a male-dominated field, and but I never felt discriminated against being a woman. I was a geek. I had the grades, and I did what I was good at, and that was school.
Very good. How much education in meteorology did you get before you joined the Air Force?
I had 0 meteorology before I joined the Air Force. I came out of school with a degree in mathematics, a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics, and the Air Force sent me to basic meteorology training, which was a 1-year program to take undergraduate courses in meteorology. My particular program didn't result in a degree in meteorology, but that didn't keep me from going on to work on advanced degrees.
What was your PhD subject when you went to Texas A&M?
I worked on tropical meteorology, and in particular, for those of you science folks out there, you know about the Hadley cell, the overturning of the atmosphere between the equator and the mid-latitudes. My major professor postulated that the Hadley cell was the composite of a lot of convection that went on near the equator, and so not just one big cell, but a whole series of convective regions that pumped energy from the equator toward the mid-latitudes.
I am familiar with your personal background, and I know that you personally are active in volcanic research. Can you explain how that applies to meteorology and to aviation?
That is my present main job, is in the Aviation Weather Services branch. I'm a volcanic ash program manager, and the reason I got involved in that is that when volcanoes spew ash up to flight altitudes, that ash can be ingested into engines and cause a whole host of problems. The most, I guess, the most memorable one being the British Airways flight decades ago that lost all 4 engines, and was piloted by a wonderful person named Captain Moody, who managed to actually get the engines relit and land the aircraft safely. But without knowing, when you're flying, you don't know that you're flying necessarily into a volcanic ash cloud, because the clouds are often obscured by other cloud because the volcano itself on an eruption can create its own meteorological environment to include lightning. So now it's something that has a host of observatories around the world. There are 9 volcanic ash advisory centers around the world, and the U.S. has 2 of those, and that's where I come in as the volcanic ash program manager within NOAA.
Well, you've certainly done some pretty exotic things in what we call weather, space weather, now volcanoes, not your traditional water and clouds. But for somebody who is interested in being a National Weather Service forecaster, what kind of path would you recommend for them? Without you went through the military, is that the primary place where most of your forecasters are coming from?
No, most of the forecasters in National Weather Service don't come from the military. Some do. Most come out of some of the major schools, and some of the major schools offering degrees in meteorology include Texas A&M, Florida State, Penn State, and I'm going to miss a bunch. There are others out there, but those are 3 that I can think of right off the bat. There are requirements for entering into the career field, so you'd have to pay attention to what you would need in terms of physics and math. And frequently people do go on for an advanced degree before they come into the career field as a forecaster, but that's not required. And as I mentioned before, folks who are really good at computer work and programming are the people who are the most sought after.
Well, a lot of your education was paid for by the United States Air Force. Would that be true also for somebody coming to the National Weather Service?
No. to be blunt about it, no. I was very fortunate in the Air Force to be able to have my schooling paid for. There are opportunities within the National Weather Service to have some of your schooling paid for, but in general, you come in with a degree.
Very good. Are there any kinds of jobs that don't have college degrees now in the National Weather Service?
There are some that would be maybe in some of the staff jobs, program analyst, for instance. To be a forecaster, it's called the 1340 series. There is a set of requirements that includes those scholastic items that I mentioned on the math and the science. There's also a physical scientist. It's called a 1301 series that isn't quite as stringent, but it also has quite a bit of science in there. So whatever you can take in terms of science and math will really benefit you in the future.
Dr. Miner, what would you recommend to a young person who is thinking about going into the weather career field, isn't quite sure, but is kind of interested? What kind of things would you recommend for that person to kind of get acquainted with weather? Where should they go? What should they do?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but I would take a stab at offering that there are professional societies that also cater to students. The National Weather Association has student chapters at colleges, as well as the American Meteorological Society. And if you really wanted to get involved in weather, that's where you'll find the camaraderie that goes along with the collegial atmosphere in the classroom.
That's great. Well, Dr. Miner, thank you so very much. I do have one final question from out there, and that was, where do you see weather evolving in the future, especially airplane weather and aviation weather? Where is that going?
Oh, well, there is a lot more that's happening that's automated. The National Weather Service is now working more toward gridded databases, and the idea behind that is we want to provide consistent products for all of our missions. We have a number of products that serve different audiences: the marine audience, the public weather audience, and the aviation audience. And we need to make sure that the products that go out to all those audiences are consistent. And I say that, for instance, we don't have thunderstorms in a forecast for airplanes that are not in the public forecast, the ones going out to the general public. So that's just an example.
Very good. One other question just popped in, and you don't necessarily have to know the answer to it, but the question did come in, and that's, I want to go chase storms. What can I go do to go chase tornadoes?
There is a storm spotter course that's offered in different places, and I'd encourage you to go on www.nws.noaa.gov or just noaa.gov and search for storm spotters and see if you can find a course in your area. You don't have to go through one of those groups. You could search on it in general and find groups that are just doing it on their own in different parts of the country.
That's great. Dr. Miner, thank you again so very much for your service in the United States Air Force and what you're doing with us in the National Weather Service, and for taking your time this evening to share your background with us in weather with the cadets of the Civil Air Patrol and Junior RTC that are online. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us, and we'll sign you off as well to go about your business for this evening. But thanks so much for sharing.
Thanks for the invitation.
And so that brings you back to me here at, and I'm the final and fourth person this evening. We can expect that there will be others who I will be interviewing later on this week who could not join us on this Sunday evening when we're doing our broadcast, but will join us, and you can expect some smaller videos and personal interviews on our YouTube channel, where this entire hour of discussion about weather career fields will be posted. My background, I started as a pilot, I started out in Junior ROTC in the state of Ohio, went off, received a nomination to the United States Air Force Academy, and from there chose geography as my career, as my major there. Did well in it. There were only a few weather courses. It was something I was interested in, physical geography. But being a pilot was my primary choice for a career. Would go to Vance Air Force Base, would go fly KC-135Q models, refueling the SR-71 around the world, and weather would again come back into my life very quickly. On my third mission as an aircraft commander of a KC-135 in a formation of 2, I was number 2. We were refueling an SR-71 in an area where the wing commander made the decision to go because the mission was important, he felt, but a weather forecaster, a contract civilian at my Air Force Base, told him that this was going to be a very iffy kind of mission because there were a lot of thunderstorms forecasted in the area, and this SR-71 never did well in a thunderstorm. Sure enough, it became a very large area of thunderstorms. The SR-71, of course, after coming down from the spy mission, needed gas. And between us was a large line of thunderstorms. There was no way to get around it. The SR-71 penetrated. We penetrated the thunderstorms. It penetrated to get to us. It lost a lot of paint. And I put a 6.5-inch hole in my radome at the front of the KC-135, and that's why we now know that lightning is basically 6 inches round because of the size of the hole in my radome. And that was in the early 1980s. The wing commander was fired for that weather decision, and it was there that I became very aware that pilots really still need to know about the weather, and that no matter how much engineering we put into airplanes, that weather is a critical part of our aviation and aerospace experience. From there, I would, like Dr. Miner, I would go off to be assigned a Air Force Institute of Technology program. I went to The Ohio State University and got a background again in geography, physical geography, meteorology, atmospheric sciences, and would go become a professor, an assistant professor in geography, and the acting head of the Department of Geography in the late 1980s. It was during that time that I started the meteorology major at that particular school, and that major now still exists for graduates of the Air Force Academy, going off directly into the weather career field for those who are interested. At that time, I stayed on for 19 more years as a reserve officer in the weather career field, rising up to colonel and the senior reserve weather officer in the United States Air Force, working as the direct advisor and understudy to the director of Air Force Weather. Excuse me. From there, during the time that I was in that 19-year period of being a reserve officer, I was still flying for a major commercial airline and still actively involved in weather in my union's safety committee. And it was during that time that I participated in 6 NTSB accidents, all involving weather. And there's an interesting statistic in why weather is still very important. In the general aviation world, weather is the #1 contributory cause of accidents in general aviation. 46% of all accidents in general aviation can attribute weather as the primary causal factor. Weather is an important part of aviation, and it always will be. For those who are interested in flying drones, that would be my last assignment, going out to Nellis Air Force Base for my final 2 years of my career, actively involved out there in almost every single Air Force weapons system through the weapons school, and there come to find that drones are very, very susceptible to weather, and again require a savvy aviator to know about the weather, be ask the right questions, and to know how to navigate around weather obstacles and weather problems. Well, that's pretty much my background. Still flying, and went off like Chaplain Albert to become Civil Air Patrol chaplain, but still now very active in the weather career field. Civil Air Patrol has actually turned around and asked me to get very involved in the aerospace education portion while I'm serving as a chaplain. And you're going to be seeing some new weather products coming out through the aerospace education program as a direct result of this initiative. Weather has been my passion. It is flying airplanes is the occupation. Weather is the passion. And it's certainly been a wonderful opportunity to give something back to aerospace education and to those who have given me the opportunity to fly airplanes. When I was a liaison officer in the 1990s with the Pennsylvania Wing of the Civil Air Patrol, while I was a reserve officer, I was actively involved in data linking the other information directly to Civil Air Patrol airplanes. You now know that that's possible through apps on iPads, through satellite, through GPS, signals, all carrying weather data into apps on your iPad that you might carry in general aviation aircraft. It sure is a wonderful opportunity to really further the aerospace world. Weather is really, really an important part of aviation, as I said, in the accident statistic, but it is actually part of general aviation and part of airmanship as a skill. And I really, really encourage each and every one of you, whether or not you plan to go into weather as a career field, if you want to put any kind of aviator badge on in the civilian world, in the military, or in any other aspect, if you want to get into the atmosphere with human engineering, weather is an important skill to have and an important part of your program. I'm going to ask Chaplain Albert to come back online with me, and
Okay, I'm back with you.
very good. I just wanted to thank you so much for being part of our program, and it seems very unusual that two chaplains would be leading leading the discussion in weather for the Civil Air Patrol. But it's a very unique background that we both have and the passion that we both carry with us. And I don't know about you, Chaplain Albert, but for me, my being a chaplain is directly related to my relationship to the atmosphere and to my relationship to the world around. And I'm just going to throw that question out to you. How do you see the world around you and your relationship as a chaplain, sir?
It absolutely is. I don't know whether you can be a weather forecaster for that many years and not realize that there's more to this life than just what's around us physically. I share the love for weather still, even in the role of chaplain and flying. And if you're a flyer, you need weather. So it all kind of goes together. I know a lot of weather folks that are in clergy positions of some sort. So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Very good. Well, it's a wonderful connection, and this is, as I said, Geography Awareness Week, and a really great opportunity to look around at the world around you and to see the sacred and the special environment and the special world that we've been given. There will be discussions in the future in Civil Air Patrol and lessons on climatology. You're hearing climate change is an issue out there. There will be lessons about that, but not now. But it's an important thing, our relationship and how we are stewards of the world around us and how we are called to, no matter what we believe, we are called to take care of the world around us as a part of being living on this planet and giving this planet over to the next generation. And so to you young folks out there who are listening to this, our backgrounds in weather for all of us, I can probably speak for all four of us on the call this evening to let you know that we really do take the very sacred trust of taking care of the world around us and giving you a world that is safe and healthy, and that is an important part of our transferring this world to you and the generation to come. Well, Chaplain Albert, do you have anything else that you'd like to say as we wrap up our hour together, sir?
No, I would just want to encourage the cadets and anyone else who's listening, ROTC, get an education and look into the fields that you really enjoy, because there's nothing like working at something you really, really enjoy. And my prayer for you is that you spend your life living your dream.
Very well said, Chaplain Albert. Thank you so very much. Well, a little bit about next month. This is our first two career webinars have been very successful, and while there aren't a lot on tonight, we're going to find that an awful lot of folks will review this video and the subsequent interviews that will come this week. That'll be added to it, and we'll have a very, very nice audience overall. And this will be a resource for you through the Chaplain Corps YouTube channel. Just look to our Facebook page for the pointers and the links to get back to this particular YouTube video. Next month, we're planning another really exciting subject, and that would be unmanned aerospace systems, drones, a really unique career field that's up and coming. According to the FAA, it's about a $32 billion industry that's waiting to explode just here in the United States. And each and every one of you in the Civil Air Patrol have the opportunity in the future to participate in the drone world and unmanned aviation aerospace systems. Well, on behalf of Commander Twining, Dr. Miner, Chaplain Albert, sure has been our privilege this evening to chat with you, and we look forward to finding other topics. Please, if you have any questions related to the weather career field, be sure to ask at careers@hc.cap.gov, and I'll make the time to go out and find that answer and send it back to you by email. On behalf of each and every one of us, I hope that you have a wonderful experience in Civil Air Patrol, and my thoughts and prayers are with you. And as the entire Chaplain Corps, on behalf of our Chief of Chaplains, Chaplain Jay Hughes, thanks so much for watching this evening, and good night.